Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore a deeply human, absolutely fascinating phenomenon: how incredibly entrenched, unfair systems of exploitation actually get challenged and ultimately transformed. To do this, we're going to dig into historical evidence from two completely different time periods and locations. Now, we'll be looking purely at the facts and the sheer gritty mechanics of change here. We aren't taking any political sides today. Instead, we're just going to neutrally unpack how everyday people and institutions push back against systems they find deeply unfair.
So, let's jump right in with a bit of a strange question. What could possibly connect a powdered wig-wearing 17th century British bureaucrat to a soot-covered 1960s Spanish coal miner? I mean, on the surface, absolutely nothing, right? But when we actually dig into the historical sources, we find a massive, universal human drive uniting them both: the relentless fight for fairness. They both represent these pivotal, high-stakes moments where people looked at the status quo and decided, no way, this is no longer acceptable.
We've got a fantastic dual case study mapped out for today. We'll start with the fight for fairness, then look at Britain's 250-year corruption war, the Hydra of state, and the invention of trust. After that, we'll shift gears entirely to Spain's 1962 silent strike and wrap up with the power of resistance.
Let's start with part 1, the fight for fairness. To really wrap our heads around how massive systems of power are reformed, we need to look at the extremes. On one side of our historical lens today, we have this incredibly slow, drawn-out battle involving British parliamentary committees, slowly uncovering accounting fraud and redefining the law over centuries. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have women in a Spanish mining town quite literally throwing grains of corn at coal mine scabs just to ensure their family's physical survival. Both are fierce fights for fairness, but their execution, totally different.
Which brings us to Section 2, Britain's 250-year corruption war.
You know, the fight against British corruption wasn't some sudden awakening where everyone just woke up one morning and decided to be ethical. Instead of a straight line to progress, it was more like intense, crashing waves of reform over centuries. In the 1640s, during the Puritan Revolution, we see the first real demands for parliamentary accounting. By the 1690s, government censorship lapses, establishing permanent freedom of the press. Jump to the 1780s, and there's this massive push to dismantle the bloated fiscal military state. And honestly, it wasn't until the 1880s, specifically the 1883 Corrupt and Illegal Practices Act, that electoral corruption was significantly reduced. We are talking about a grueling administrative and cultural shift that took immense time.
Now for Section 3, the Hydra of State.
Check out this 1784 satirical cartoon. It perfectly captures the absolute essence of systemic corruption during this era. They saw it as a literal multi-headed hydra. You remember the Greek myth, right? You cut off one head, two more grow back in its place. Reformers felt the exact same way about the state apparatus. Whether they were trying to root out financial abuses in the Royal Navy or tackle the staggering wealth extraction by the East India Company, the corruption just kept regenerating.
Navigating this beast was deeply personal and highly dangerous. Take the Earl of Macaterney in the 1780s, sent to Madras to clean up the East India Company. He prided himself on his total integrity, famously refusing even the smallest gifts. But listen, he was the exception. The historical record reveals that actual whistleblowers, like a naval official named Robert Crossfield, who actively tried to expose the system, were often arrested, smeared as informers, and sometimes even dismissed as medically mad. You had to be incredibly brave or maybe just insanely stubborn to swim against that tide.
Let's move to Section 4, the invention of trust. Eventually, there was a massive breakthrough: the legal definition of entrusted power. This changed everything. Before this, holding a public office was mostly viewed as a personal possession. It was yours to buy, sell, or use to hook up your friends. But slowly, this radical concept of fiduciary trust took hold. It was the groundbreaking idea that public authority is a legal trust exercised strictly for the benefit of the people. It transitioned the whole concept of office holding from a corrupt system of personal favors into an impartial duty of care.
But, as you can imagine, bringing this beautiful new ideal into reality was fiercely hindered by the facts on the ground. Deeply ingrained cultural norms blurred the lines between what was a gift and what was a bribe. There's this famous 1783 case of Charles Bembridge, an accountant, who actually used social decorum and friendship as his legal defense for covering up massive fraud for his boss. Add to that the chaotic financial demands of global wars and the total lack of clear statutory definitions for bribery, and it totally makes sense why this top-down reform took over 200 years.
All right, let's completely shift gears for Section 5. Spain's 1962 silent strike.
Jumping forward to 1962 Spain, pushing back against an unfair system was absolutely not a matter of polite parliamentary debate. It was an immediate matter of physical survival under General Franco's dictatorship. 200%, that's the number you need to keep in mind. While Franco's regime was busy trying to project this shiny economic miracle to the world, the reality on the ground was terrifying. The price of basic, life-sustaining foods like potatoes and bread skyrocketed by up to 200%. This massive inflation threw already struggling mining families in the Asturias region into total desperation.
And the working conditions? These miners were practically trapped in the 19th century. They'd leave the freezing mine tunnels with their uniforms completely soaked through. There were no basic hot showers to wash off the coal dust, and they didn't even have enough time to dry their clothes on the coal stoves before heading back down for their next shift. The breaking point finally came when 7 miners at the Pozo Nicolasa mine were suspended simply for demanding a raise so they could eat. Those deplorable conditions ignited what is now known as the legendary silent strike.
What's truly incredible here is the sheer ingenuity of the resistance, which was led largely by women. Enter Anita Sergo. She grew up surviving fascist persecution. Her father was killed in the resistance, and she became the absolute catalyst for the strike's success. Every single day at 5 a.m., she and other women would march to the mines and literally throw grains of corn, chicken feed, at the men trying to break the strike. It was a brilliant, deeply psychological tactic. By treating these scabs like chickens, they totally shamed them into turning around, successfully keeping the pits closed and crippling the regime's economy.
And that brings us to our final section, the power of resistance.
Putting these two totally distinct timelines side by side brilliantly illustrates our main theme today. On the one hand, we have Britain's institutional reform, a grueling 250-year slow burn of top-down legal wrangling and bureaucratic oversight to redefine public trust. And on the other hand, Spain's grassroots strike, immediate, bottom-up defiance where everyday people risked brutal imprisonment just for physical survival. But here's the ultimate takeaway. Whether it takes centuries of high-level parliamentarian debate or a dangerous 5 a.m. march with a handful of corn, fighting unfairness always requires incredible, sustained human bravery pushing back against the machine. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. The legacy of these incredibly brave individuals, from those isolated British whistleblowers all the way to the fierce women of the Spanish coalfields, literally built the institutional standards we rely on today. So looking at the world around us right now, what is your role in demanding fairness? Whether it's bureaucratic or grassroots, how will future generations judge the ways we hold our own institutions accountable today? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep asking those big questions, keep digging for the facts, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.